Welcome to the 7 domains of women's health, the 7 domains of midlife. I'm Dr. Katie Ward. I'm a professor in nursing and a practicing nurse practitioner and a nationally certified menopause specialist and also a PhD candidate in anthropology. And I am joined today by our usual host, Dr. Kirtley Parker Jones from obstetrics and gynecology and my dear friend. And so today we're going to talk about the social domain of menopause. This is a place where there's sort of no one-size-fits-all conversation. There are certain things that are predictable about menopause and certain things that are not. So the social life can be fairly broad-ranging conversation. I think for some people, this time in life can be incredibly freeing. So whether you're in a long-term relationship or a long-term friendship or just back out on the dating scene, for a lot of people, it's a time of newfound freedom and exploration. For other people, it can be a little bit of a challenging time of, feeling like they're stuck in a place that they don't want to be, but not quite sure how to get out of that. So we're gonna kind of talk about all of these things, Curly.
Throughout the planet, it's across different cultures and different life ways. This is an interesting and powerful time for women, and let's talk about it.
Well, I think I see patients in all different kinds of situations. Certainly, I have patients who are in a long-term relationship, and the menopause is changing the dynamics in that relationship. Maybe sex is becoming a little bit less accessible, or maybe it's painful. And this can be an issue sometimes for both partners. And then there are some of the other issues we've talked about on previous episodes around maybe you're just feeling a little bit more irritable or edgy or not sleeping as well, and your partner's presence in the bed is bothering you. So I do see people who are in long-term relationships where they're feeling a little more vulnerable in that space. They're just, lots of things maybe aren't working as well as they have. And so, that's one aspect, is talking to people about how do they find connection and how do you keep desire going in a long-term relationship?
Well, I think that it's one of the most common reasons that women in their late 50s and 60s aren't regularly sexually active is the absence of a willing and capable partner. So we always say, oh, well, if you're not having sex in midlife, it must be women. But in fact, it's often because women either don't have a partner, they're unpartnered at the time, and maybe they're looking for a new partner and maybe they're not, or that their own partner is having his or her own difficulties either with sexual intimacy or they're having their own midlife issues, and they just can't bring it to the table and really work on it as a couple. It's a difficult time, I think.
It is. And so I think, I talk about this, both with my patients and with my friends that, there's, all relationships need really good communication. So there's a lot you can fix with lubrication and communication in the midlife.
Yeah.
And, I think we don't talk about as much is that men are going through some hormone changes as well. They're maybe not as dramatic as they're not as sudden or finite. So men are making less testosterone, but it's a little bit more gradual. But for the male partner, if women are in a partnership with a male, that they may have some intermittent changes in their sexual function, and that creates some anxiety, and that whole dynamic of having anxiety, performance anxiety for males, or is intercourse going to hurt for females, that then both people start kind of avoiding that, and you end up in a cycle where there's a lot of avoidance. So communication, I think, is the key here.
Yeah, and it ends up, once you get into a cycle of just not being as frequent as you were in your encounters, you drift off into it and it doesn't become a habit anymore. And as much as you don't want it to be that way in a long-term relationship, often sex becomes either a habit that you lose in midlife, and because you're not driven by your own sexual needs, just your own pacemaker of sexual needs, either yours or your partner's. And when you're not driven by that, it becomes what's your habit, which you always used to do Saturday or whatever. And then you're not. And it ends up being a change in a life way. And if people don't think about it, or they say this is just normal, and it might be just normal for you. And having been myself in a 50-year relationship, I think that one of the ways to be successful is to set the expectations bar very low. It's a terrible thing when people say, "Gee, how did you manage to be with the same guy for so long?" I said, "Well, at first I picked well, and I set the expectation bar really low, and I told him where it was so he wouldn't trip on it. So here's my expectations, and here it is right here so you can see it. And I'll tell you when I think I'm getting something, or not getting what I want." And when it comes to intimacy, it's a complicated issue, and some people want to keep it moving, some people don't, and some people just don't want it with this person anymore because they are not connected to this person anymore. And it's time to move on. And then you've got a midlife person who would like to be mated, would like to be partnered, and then you've got to go out and find a partner. Oh my God, I'm glad I don't do that. I wish best for everybody. And maybe I'll be 80 and doing that.
Yeah, so let's move on to that scenario. I think
there
are a couple of there are a couple possibilities. Like certainly I have a few friends and a number of patients who, the midlife is the beginning of a new renaissance in their relationship, and they're really having a great time. And for other people where their intimacy becomes a little less about sex and more about companionship. But there are some interesting statistics about the midlife where, it's one of the times where women are most likely to initiate a divorce. So I think that there is something about reaching that point in your life where you're a little more certain of yourself and perhaps a little bit more financially secure, and your children aren't quite so needy, that if it's not a good relationship, that it might be time to move on. And so there's some interesting information about when women are the partners initiating a divorce. There may be that people are leaving their relationship, and then certainly there's probably, I think it's about a third of people over 50 are on dating apps and looking to meet somebody else, whether they were ever married or recently divorced. But dating at this period of time can be really rewarding, and some people meet the love of their life. I have other patients who reconnect with their high school sweetheart on Facebook at age 70.
At their 40th reunion or something. Long time the guy you had a crush.
Rekindle a relationship that they'd always dreamt about. So I think anything's possible. But dating, let's talk about dating a little bit, because that is it is an interesting world out there of dating when you're in the midlife.
Oh gosh, I think I'd be so anxious that first of all, I'm a surgeon. I pick A or B, or maybe C, 1, 2, or 3. And having many options as a surgeon, it's like, forget that. I would narrow down my options to some tiny little thing, because I can make decisions well, but don't give me too many choices.
Right? The paradox of choice. There's interesting research on that if you walk into a jeans store and they only sell one kind of jeans, your odds are you're going to be happy with that one pair of jeans. But if there are 100 different types, that you try them all on and your satisfaction with any of them goes down. So I think that is one of the challenges about online dating, and is that you keep swiping because maybe there's going to be something better if you keep looking. So narrowing down the choices.
FOBO, F-O-B-O, FOBO, the fear of a better offer. Like, you keep swiping because maybe there's something else out there. But
I think for women, there is some interesting research on this, that for women who are out there dating on the apps, as my younger generation people tell me these are called, as you're on the apps, women are a little bit more likely to have a negative experience out there. And those negative experiences can range from being the target of a scam, a financial scam, or a relationship scam, or getting sent unwanted pictures, or
Oh.
being confronted with unwanted offers. So I think there's kind of somebody, like, there's a steep learning curve for women who are getting out on the dating market. There's actually an interesting researcher out there who, I think she's dating herself, but she's ended up, this has become her area of study, is, what's the language of being on a dating app, and how do you construct a profile that attracts the kind of people that you
Oh.
are interested in, and also repels the people that you're not interested in. So she's actually created a whole Facebook group for, her demographic started out primarily as midlife women, but I think it's expanded to younger women, about really how to leverage these algorithms. And I think that's another thing that people should understand when they're out on the dating, using the apps, is that this is it's a machine that's there actually to make money. It's really not there to
Not even eHarmony? I thought eHarmony was going to find my next soulmate if I needed one.
Yeah, and I think Hinge, that's their tagline. It's there to be deleted. So they get you. They hook you that way by telling you they exist to help you find the love of your life. But really, their power move is to keep you coming back. And so I think in some ways the apps sort of exist to get you to log on, shop around, get fed up with the whole deal, get off, give up for a while, and then come back and try again. So,
Oh, no. Oh,
so
no. Well, that's it's like getting a car that falls apart, or your computer becomes obsolescent. So they link you up with someone that you're guaranteed to fall apart with in 2 years, so you'll come back and do it again. Is it built-in obsolescence into the AI of this machine? We're going to set you up with the person you want, but it'll only work for 2 years, and then you have to come back and do it all over again.
Well, exactly. I don't know if it's that intentional, but I do think that there's a little bit of you stop paying money if you find your soulmate, right? So the guys or the gals, anybody on the ads for these apps always looks a little bit better than the actual content. And I think people do, like, there's a little bit of a learning curve of figuring out how, and that's where this researcher I was talking about is like, don't take these things personally. If somebody's not a match, block them and force the machine to show you more people. So there's a lot to have to learn about how to use these apps in a savvy way that helps you find the people you want.
I feel so bad about blocking somebody. Like might hurt their feelings. I could see I would have a very difficult time if I was forced to. Then I don't want to block somebody because I might hurt their feelings, and I don't know.
I think it's a good thing you don't have to date in this market. So that's a good segue into something else I wanted to talk a little bit about, which is for individuals who are out, dating in, the second half of their life, that you might not have to be so concerned about pregnancy anymore, because that is one of the hallmarks of being menopausal, is that pregnancy is not a concern. But you do have to be concerned about sexually transmitted infections. And I feel like a little bit in my hat as a clinician that negotiating condom use can be a little bit more awkward for somebody that's been in a long-term relationship where that wasn't something they had to worry about, and now is meeting new partners, is thinking about the risk for sexually transmitted infections. And it's something we've been talking about in the public health sphere, that we're seeing an increase in sexually transmitted infections in assisted living.
I mean, people, because I think that because that's only young people get those diseases, whether it's warts or whether it's something else. And the manifestation of these diseases often is a little bit different, because particularly for women after menopause, they're a little less likely to get cervical cancer, but they still could get warts, and they're horrified. And I thought, well, gee, can we talk a little bit about condoms? And it's not something that they feel comfortable initiating a conversation about with their partner. They figure if someone's got tested for AIDS, that was fine. That's good enough. It's like, oh gosh.
Yeah, and depending on your age, you might be past the age where you can get the HPV vaccine, where people under 45 can get that covered by your insurance. But if you're over 45, it's a very expensive vaccine, although it is available. And I would encourage patients who are out there dating to maybe think about paying the money for it, because it could be worth getting. But you're right, like, figuring out how do you negotiate condom use. And so that means, if I'm dating, I have condoms and I have them available and I carry them with me.
Well, I had I knew a woman who had been divorced, and she was doing her travel the world thing now that she was free and her kids were gone, and she was just going to go see the world. And she put on her backpack and she went to youth hostels and did what kids do in youth hostels. And she was 55 or 60, and she came back, and I said, how were you about protection? And she said, oh, I don't think I have to worry about that. I said, well, you kind of do, but
that, yeah, I think that can be a a tricky thing, or something just important to talk about. There's another interesting phenomenon for women in particular, since we're talking about the 7 domains of women's health, that sometimes women fall in love with somebody totally unexpected. So that's another thing I see in, again, both in my patients and in my friends and colleagues, is that women who were, considered themselves straight and were in a heterosexual relationship and had children, and find themselves falling in love with a female partner. And
right.
That's a whole interesting phenomenon, where these are people who didn't necessarily always identify as gay, or queer, or any of the other sort of vocabulary around that, but they fall in love with a person, and the gender isn't exactly what matters. It's the person they fall in love with. And so I think that's another interesting experience that's waiting for some folks out there.
Absolutely. I think many people that I've known who were looking for someone because of a death or because of a divorce, it's the person they were looking for. Yeah, they'd like to have someone who's gorgeous and, fit and strong and young and slim, but they're really looking for a person,
Mm-hmm.
and that person can come in different forms. I don't know if there refers to the book, the movie, The Book Club, in which all the members of this book club have a resurgence in their love lives in an unexpected way, in their 60s and later. So it's fun because they were really looking for a person.
Right. And, the other thing I think we were talking about in a previous episode was that, you know yourself a little bit better, and you're a little bit more confident in, as you get through the other side of the menopause transition and the midlife. And I also see women whose sex life really blossoms in that second phase of life, where they're a little bit more willing to ask for what they want from a partner, and a little bit more willing to and I think, again, that's a dynamic that sometimes people learn. So you get in a relationship when you're young and you have one particular dynamic, and I've seen that a lot, where that the sex in that relationship wasn't great, and out of concern for hurting somebody's feelings, or not having the vocabulary to discuss it, or even the permission to have become fluent in the language of your own sexuality, that I have patients that discover orgasm for the first time quite later in life, and then sort of enjoy a whole new relationship with new partners.
Yeah, as you go around the world, there are many cultures in which women are not expected to be sexually active, and this is a part of their life where their sexual life is now moved aside. And traditionally, in some Eastern cultures, men had concubines, or they had women that they took their sexual lives to, but the women, their wives, originally ran the family, but that wasn't expected to be part of their life anymore. So from culture to culture, when one talks about midlife and sexuality and menopause, it is difficult to find the language, even if we're all speaking English. We're not always speaking English culture. And I think as a clinician, or even as we talk about it on a podcast, our listeners may come from a culture where the whole business about a blossoming sexuality at 60 or 55 is like, what are they talking about? Mm. That's not what we do. Or maybe they do, they just don't talk about it. And so I think it's trying to know what is normal. And I think that range of normal is so huge. It's more not what is normal, but is what are you hoping for? What are you hoping for in your relationships or in your relationship with a romantic partner? Do you want one at all? And how does that work in a different culture?
No, I think there is that. And I think we talked about dating, and it's possible that you don't find your person on an app or anywhere else. And you sort of get to a place where it's going to be okay to be alone. And I think lots of people resolve that in a way where they're very happy with that, and they start investing in more deeply in their friendships, or if they have children and grandchildren, that becomes really the focus of their time and attention. But there really isn't what the Surgeon General has called an epidemic of loneliness and isolation, and I think we really became increasingly aware of that during COVID, where we couldn't see each other, and it's an issue that gets compounded by a lot of other kinds of situations: physical disability, health issues, socioeconomic issues, being marginalized from any kind of racial or minority group, or being LGBTQI plus, living in a rural area. There are lots of things that begin to compound that loneliness, and aging is one of them. Just the ability to get out and go places. And so I think there are a lot of things that we need to start to think about around as a society. How do we address those problems? And one of them, there are many of them, but I think one that's particularly important to talk about is, our reliance on social media. That we are, a world now kind of walking around, spending a lot more time looking at our screens, and maybe a lot less time checking on our neighbors or checking on our family and friends. And I think, both individually, that we need to be looking at how do we create and maintain those connections, but also as a society, like what are the structural things that are contributing to people feeling alone and isolated in the world?
Well, one of my happiest visions is a group of 55 to 65-year-old women together just hooting it up. I mean, it's maybe 7 women around the table, and maybe they're doing nothing. In the olden days, there used to be quilting, so older women would get together to quilt, and then there was bridge, or even people who came from lower socioeconomic statuses would sit on their stoops with their girlfriends who were of the same age, the old grandmas, and they would just be laughing and laughing. And that's what I want for myself. That's all I want for my beloved friends. I want them to be with their girlfriends and just having a hoot. And how do we institutionalize that? How do we begin to create that?
Creating the community and that space, and
right.
And it is it's a structural problem that how we live and how we move about the world and the places we join. And I think, for each of us individually, it's one of those things about thinking about how do you create community, and how do you get into groups of like-minded people that, where the portal is not your phone or Facebook, but that these are people in real life that you can spend time with. And that, so for, I think, all of us, it's like cultivating those friendships, investing in them, and, making the time to have this memory of my mother when she retired. She and a group of women that she worked with, they all packed off and went to Disneyland. And that's one of my favorite pictures of her is quite I mean, I guess she wasn't really that old now that I think about it, but she seemed old. and her friends, and they were all about a similar age, riding the log flume in Disneyland and
Exactly.
enjoying
And
being retired.
I think I had this vision of smaller towns where you didn't have to walk so far and everybody knew each other's business, and people say, oh, that's so awful. But in fact, small towns are often where people do know when someone hasn't shown up at the grocery store, or someone hasn't shown up for a while. And maybe it's people's churches serve as some kind of source of social get together, because often after the Sunday service, there's get together for coffee, and people just laugh and have coffee or gossip. I mean, that's what grannies were made for, right? We're supposed to sit around and laugh and gossip. And how we bring that into our lives in some way, I'm not saying everybody has to gossip, but how you bring it into your life so that you have those connections with people that you can laugh with. And it's really important.
I think maybe it was a greeting card. It was on a slide that you used to have, and when you were giving talks, currently, has this girl watering a
oh, yes.
row of flowers.
And who are all her own little self, her little mentees or her girlfriends. You got to water your girlfriends. If you want to have friends, you got to water them a little bit. You just do.
Yeah. So I think of the nursery rhyme of, making new friends but keeping the old.
Oh yeah.
One is silver and the
other is gold. Oh gosh. Wow, that's a great. We should sing that together, but maybe not right now.
You don't want to hear me sing.
Oh, I like to sing a pretty song.
Yeah, you were going to be Barbara Streisand.
I was, but I didn't quite have the voice for it. Too bad. Well, as we finish up, I think the time for midlife is to think about your intimate connections and your single person. Get closer to your sibs if you can, because often we were so busy, we let our sibs go. I know in my life, I was so busy, and now I'm closer to my sibs than I ever do. And we visit more, ever was, visit more. And my girlfriends, Katie, you mean more to me than ever. Aww. These are really important things in our life.
I think, that's the analogy, right? Water your garden and to take good care of those important relationships. I think it's also, we touched on this a little bit, it's important to look at the relationships that are not serving you and, not feeling stuck in those either. So I think that time in the midlife of, tending to yourself and figuring out, what is the garden you want to cultivate.
Nobody sends Christmas cards anymore. Used to be I could count on who the people I was wanting to get in touch with by my Christmas cards, and now people don't do that except me. I think, and even I didn't do it last year very much. How do you reach out? Not necessarily electronically, to have a giggle or to laugh or hear what's important to people. And I think that's a critical mission for anybody who's entering midlife, is to look at their garden of friends and start watering them and prune the ones that don't serve you, but take really good care of your pretty flowers and do the best you can to keep them alive and growing in your life. Thank you for joining us on the 7 domains of health and this special midlife edition. And in particular, this episode on the social domain of midlife. And stay tuned, because we'll be doing the other parts of the domains. And you can listen to our podcast anywhere you get your podcasts, or at Women's7, WOMENS7.com. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned, because we've got more on being in the middle of your life.